Joining us now, Gordon Smith, the CEO of the National Association of Broadcasters. Mr. Smith, thank you so much for being with us here today. Talk to me a little bit about the obstacles and some of the frustrations that broadcasters face when it comes to spectrum.
Well, we understand that there's a spectrum shortage, but we want Americans to understand we already gave back nearly a third of our spectrum, our airwaves, our highways in the air, when we did the digital transition. And yet it's not even 2 years and already they're saying we got to have more. The problem for broadcasting is simply that we think broadcasting, before this is done in any reckless way, has a contribution to the American people that is enormously important, particularly like today in a blizzard in the Midwest. There's 100 million Americans who are dependent upon a broadcast signal. It is a one-to-everyone transmission and providing life-saving, necessary emergency information. You put it all over to broadband where you get better apps and faster downloads and things like that. There's not enough broadband in the world to accommodate the American people in an emergency. So we see a world that includes broadband and broadcast.
But what is the FCC really asking for? Would broadcasters have to give up their channels?
It depends on how they do it. They say they want another 120 megahertz, which is about what we gave up before. But that would potentially require those who don't volunteer to go out of business to be repackaged in a way where they have to share a channel or in a way that pushes them into a VHF band, which is an inferior band in terms of the quality of the airwaves. And we think that that's a mistake. Broadcasting is doing well and provides a great service to the American people. I mean, part of being in any community is getting broadcast content. Your local news, weather and sports, and emergency information. And we think the trade-off, just so we can have more apps, is not exactly the right trade-off.
If you look at growth in industry, though, you say broadcasters doing well. Broadcast revenue since 2005 down 26%. Wireless subscribership during that time booming up 45%.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that broadcasters are facing right now?
Well, the percent of growth depends on the base you start from. I mean, broadcasting reaches, more than 200 million Americans every day. I don't know what base that those numbers start from in terms of broadband, but clearly it's growing. I mean, I love my iPhone, I love my iPad, I like my apps, and I like them faster. But I also like my local news that I turn on every morning and find out what kind of traffic issue there is, what kind of weather I'm going to be confronting, what my favorite team did in sports, and what the local mayors are proposing that might affect my pocketbook. So these are trade-offs that I think people need to understand. And if this is done incorrectly or recklessly, what ends up happening is broadcast content, which is what most people watch. There's cable content, but broadcast content is very important to people, and it's free to them. We don't charge people. All these other services will be billing by the bit in short order. So people like free, broadcasting has it, the other folks don't.
I guess, is there any challenge or any motivation to compete with some of these wireless companies? There's a lot of talk about mobile video, and what kind of opportunity could that space provide?
Well, what's really interesting is we're the original mobile video. I mean, broadcast mobile video we're going to have available to people in their areas. That's happening because of the digital transition. But the broadcast mobile video doesn't hog bandwidth. When you put it over Wi-Fi, that's where 75% of the shortage comes from. If we're just moving data and voice over broadband, there's no spectrum shortage. You throw video on there, which we do without any congestion, they congest it up entirely. And so these are trade-offs when it comes to video that we can do more efficiently than anybody on a Wi-Fi basis.
But do you see broadcasters finding new uses for those?
Oh, absolutely.
airwaves?
I see with the digital transition, what was promised to broadcasters when we gave up a third of our spectrum was that we would be able to do multicasting, which is very valuable to minority communities, to immigrant communities, to religious communities, to different kinds of channels, sports channels, so that when, for example, Channel 4 in this town, they've got Channel 4, Channel 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and they have different programs on there, all within their 6 megahertz space. And now you start packing people differently, and you lose that. And you lose mobile video, which is the future. You'll be able to look at you have the right app, not a streamed app, but a broadcast app. You'll be able to just watch your local news, whether in sports, live sports, not delayed, but live sports from a broadcast signal on these same devices. So yeah, we do compete, and we do it for free. We don't send you a monthly bill.
If you could boil down this spectrum crunch issue and look to the future, what do you see happening?
I see broadcasters who want to go out of business being willing to volunteer, and hopefully they'll get bought out by the federal government. But what I don't want to see is for those who don't volunteer to go out of business to be impacted in ways that they didn't volunteer for, to be repackaged in a way that damages their signal. And I think people like high definition signals. There is no clear high definition signal that a consumer enjoys than what they get from an old-fashioned antenna. And a lot of people, in fact, are the most vulnerable Americans. When I say vulnerable, the disadvantaged economically, many seniors, many rural people, they get their television not from a subscription service. They get it free over the air, and that's important.
So ultimately, you wouldn't be against a spectrum auction if broadcasters were compensated. And do you want to see
people
let's talk
who
about
volunteer,
the FCC a little bit.
those who don't volunteer should be held harmless from those who choose to volunteer to go out of business. Those who choose to remain shouldn't be repackaged to their disadvantage or to lose some of the features like mobile and multicasting that they were promised, and even 3D perhaps in the future. Those things all go away if you repack recklessly. And I'm just simply saying that people need a world that includes broadband and broadcast.
How do you grade Chairman Genachowski on this issue?
I think he's a very bright man. He's leading a tough issue. We're happy to work with him, but he clearly wants more broadcast spectrum. I want him to have that which broadcasters volunteer, but I don't want him to harm those who wish to stay as they are, because they already gave up a lot of spectrum.
What do you think the FCC's role is here, and what is the government's role over these airwaves?
Well, it's interesting. Broadcast airwaves are highly regulated by the FCC. Now, they're trying to regulate Wi-Fi or the internet. That's what we're talking about. That's totally unregulated by the FCC unless they get their order passed and approved by Congress on net neutrality, which the courts have kept throwing out, because they don't have the authority to regulate the internet. So it's interesting that they're trying to get more spectrum that they regulate in the hands of those that they do not regulate, which is an interesting thing.
What are some of the worst case scenarios? Do we lose our local news?
Well, if they did it wrong, you certainly could. But let's be honest, the only place there's a problem is in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. There's not a spectrum shortage anywhere else in America. And a lot of the problem, and I don't think many of your viewers will understand this, it's sort of a quilt blanket of licensees. And to really make this meaningful for Wi-Fi, they have to get enough to get out of business, say in Los Angeles, and they want to clear these bands all the way across the country, which means they force broadcasters to go into inferior bands, which would repackage them maybe in a channel sharing way, but it may also damage their ability to do multicasting, to do mobile television, and perhaps even degrade the high definition signal. I don't think that's in the interest of the American people.
Can you take us behind the scenes at all? What's going on in Capitol Hill? National Association of Broadcasters, CTIA, we're really seeing a lobbying battle.
Well, Steve Largent's a good friend of mine, and we served together in Congress, he in the House, I in the Senate. He's got a job to do, so do I. He wants what we have, and we want to stay in business. And so Congress has to be the ultimate arbitrator of how much of the national broadband plan makes sense, how much to take from broadcasters, how much and give to his telephone company members, who will charge people, whereas broadcasters won't. Ours is an advertising model. And Congress ultimately has to authorize these auctions that would buy out broadcasters. I'll tell you another misgiving I have is, having served in the U.S. Senate, given the tremendous shortage of dollars to fund the government and at its current size, when I was there, spectrum auctions were the pay-for everything, but it never quite got across the finish line. So you got broadcasters who may sign up to volunteer to go out of business, assuming there's money there. There's a lot of other claimants to money than broadcasters just to buy them out to go out of business. So I'm telling broadcasters, fine, volunteer if you would like, but you better make sure the check cashes before you abandon your space.
Very interesting. Thank you, Mr. Smith, so much for being here with us today.